Peace with Ireland, or a good case for further, and what would undoubtedly have been more intensive war, had become a necessity to the British cabinet. Politicians of both the great historic parties in Britain had become united in the conviction that it was essential for the British to put themselves right with the world. Referring to the peace offer which Mr. Lloyd George, on behalf of his cabinet and Parliament, had made to Mr. De Valera in July 1921, an offer which was not acceptable to the Irish people, Mr. Churchill said on September the 24th at Dundee, "This offer is put forward not as the offer of a party government confronted by a formidable opposition and anxious to bargain for the Irish vote, but with the united sanction of both the historic parties in the state and indeed all parties. It is a national offer." Yes, it was a national offer, representing the necessity of the British to clean their Irish slate. The premiers of the free nations of the British Commonwealth were in England fresh from their people. They were able to express the views of their people, and the Washington Conference was looming ahead. Mr. Lloyd George's cabinet had its economic difficulties at home. Their relationship with foreign countries were growing increasingly unhappy. The recovery of world opinion was becoming, in fact, it had become, indispensable. Ireland must be disposed of by means of a generous peace. If Ireland refused that settlement, we could be shown to be irreconcilables. Then Britain would again have a free hand for whatever further actions were necessary to restore law and order in a country that would not accept the responsibility of doing so for itself. Peace had become necessary. It was not because Britain repented in the very middle of her black and tan terror. It was not because she could not subjugate us. It was because she had not succeeded in subjugating us before world conscience was awakened and was able to make itself felt. The progress of the coercive attempts made by the government have proved in a high degree disappointing, said Lord Birkenhead frankly in the British House of Lords on August the 10th. What was the position on each side? Right was on our side. World sympathy was on our side. Passive sympathy, largely. We had shown a mettle that was fair indication of what we could do again if freedom were denied us. We were united. We had taken out of the hands of the enemy a good deal of government. We knew it would be no easy matter for him to recover his lost ground in that regard. We had prevented the enemy so far from defeating us. We had not, however, succeeded in getting the government entirely into our hands, and we had not succeeded in beating the British out of Ireland militarily. We had unquestionably seriously interfered with their government, and we had prevented them from conquering us. That was the sum of our achievement. We had reached in July last the high water mark of what we could do in the way of economic and military resistance. We also recognised facts in regard to North East Ulster. We clearly recognised that our national view was not shared by the majority in the 4 northeastern counties. We knew that that majority had refused to give allegiance to an Irish Republic. Before we entered the conference, we realised these facts among ourselves. We had abandoned for the time being the hope of achieving the ideal of independence under the Republican form. It is clear that the British on their side knew that unless we obtained a real substantial freedom, we would resist to the end at no matter what cost. But they also knew that they could make a generous settlement with us. They knew equally well that an offer of such a settlement would disarm the world criticism which could no longer be ignored. They knew that they could do these 2 major things and still preserve the nations of the British Commonwealth from violent disruption. The British believed, and still believe, that they need not and could not acquiesce in secession by us, and they need not and could not acquiesce in the establishment of a republican government so close to their own shores. This would be regarded by them as a challenge, a defiance which would be a danger to the very safety of England herself. It would be presented in this light to the people of England. It would be presented as a disruption of the British Empire and would form a headline for other places. South Africa would be the first to follow our example, and Britain's security and prestige would be gone. The British spokesmen believed that they dared not agree to such a forcible breaking away. It would show not only their empire to be intolerable, but themselves feeble and futile. Looking forward through the operation of the world forces to the development of freedom, it is certain that at some time acquiescence in the ultimate separation of the units will come. The American colonies of Britain got their freedom by a successful war. Canada, South Africa, and the other states of the British Commonwealth are approaching the same end by peaceful growth. In this Britain acquiesces. Separation by peaceful stages of evolution does not expose her and does not endanger her. In judging the merits and examining the details of the peace we brought back, these factors must be taken into consideration.